President.
Senator from California.
Thank you, Madam President. Reserving the right to object, I'd like to make an observation. The notice for this went out less than an hour ago. The consultations with others haven't been made. It was precipitously brought to the floor, and I can only infer that it's got political implications because the President of China is due to arrive here tomorrow. And therefore, this would be passed today, moved out of committee without a vote in front of the Senate. I don't think that's the way we should do business in this Senate. Now, maybe people don't believe diplomacy makes a difference, but I do. And I think there will be ample talk for the President to speak with the President of China and for some of us to speak as well. And this is, of course, the human rights are, of course, a subject. But in the absence of that, I object.
Objection is heard.
Madam President.
Senator from Texas.
I would note this is a sad day for this body. When standing up to the Soviet Union, Democrats and Republicans were able to come together in support of Andrei Sakharov. And it worked. It made a difference speaking up for human rights. The senior senator from California is correct that this was expedited, and she is correct as to why. As I just said on this floor speech, the presence of President Xi in this country is precisely the reason that we should stand in unanimity in support of human rights. It is what makes it timely. Until a few minutes ago, we had been informed that there were no objections on both the Democratic side and the Republican side. And it saddens me. I know there are many Chinese Americans in the state of California. There are many Chinese Americans in the state of Texas. And across the country, there are millions of Americans who care for human rights. Just this morning, we sat on the floor of the House of Representatives and listened to Pope Francis talk about putting aside petty partisan differences and coming together with a voice of compassion. Madam President, Dr. Liu is in a Chinese prison, and the senior senator from California is standing and objecting to recognizing this Nobel laureate's bravery. Is standing and objecting because presumably it would embarrass his communist captors. I, for one, think as Americans we should not be troubled by embarrassing communist oppressors, and I would note, as the senior senator from California leaves the floor, that this is not an issue that is abstract to me. My family, like Dr. Liu, has been imprisoned by oppressive regimes. My father, as a teenager, was imprisoned and tortured in Cuba. He had his nose broken. He had his teeth shattered. He lay in the blood and grime of a prison cell in Cuba. My aunt, my tia Sonia, was a few years later again imprisoned and tortured, this time by Castro. My father by Batista, my aunt by Castro. Imprisoned and tortured by a communist regime, and it is a sad statement when the United States of America cannot stand up and say, you who are imprisoned unjustly, we stand with you. If any of us listen to a word Pope Francis said this morning, that is a word we should have heard, that we should be a voice of freedom, a clarion voice of freedom across this globe. What we just saw on this Senate floor saddens me greatly. I understand that Democrats feel partisan loyalty to the White House, and that this White House, Secretary Clinton said at the beginning of the administration, human rights are off the table. America no longer stands for human rights. We will coddle up with oppressors if they make cheap calculators to sell in our stores. I think they're values that transcend the mighty dollar. And it is entirely possible to deal with foreign countries and yet maintain our principles and speak with humanity. You know, a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to visit with Natan Sharansky, the famed Soviet dissident. He and I visited in Jerusalem. He talked to me about how when he was in the Soviet gulag, the prisoners would pass from cell to cell notes. Did you hear what President Reagan said? Evil empire. ash heap of history. Tear down this wall. That the leadership of the United States of America, and mind you, it wasn't partisan leadership, it was clear, bipartisan leadership in America, shined a light to the dark of those prison cells. Madam President, I pray today that Dr. Liu, in his prison cell, does not hear word that Democratic senators are unwilling to stand with him. That is heartbreaking at a level rarely seen. It's one thing for us to disagree on partisan matters. We can have disagreements over the appropriate rate of capital gains taxes. But for standing with an oppressed Nobel Peace Laureate, standing up to communist oppression, that should not be a partisan divide. The objection raised by the senior senator from California is deeply disappointing. And I intend to continue to press this issue because the voice of America, the voice for freedom that Pope Francis urged us to aspire to, will not be extinguished. It is who we are. It is essential to our character and to our integrity. I yield the floor.